what we have before us are the rich feasts that conscience cannot appreciate, and mortal men cannot know without regret. God kills, and so shall we, indiscriminately. He takes the richest and the poorest, and so shall we. For no creatures under God are as we are, none so like him as ourselves. Dark angels, not confined to the stinking limits of hell, but wandering his earth and all its kingdoms. AMC's Interview with the Vampire just premiered a couple of days ago on AMC Plus. The first 2 episodes are out, and I had to admit I'm having a blast. For anyone who does not know, Interview with the Vampire was originally a 1976 novel by the late great Anne Rice. It originally had an amazing film adaptation in 1994 with Brad Pitt. Am I saying that wrong? And Tom Cruise as our lead roles. Now, the original film is perfect, for more or less perfect. It's one of the best books to film adaptations ever probably made. So most people were kinda, well, I say most people, were kinda iffy when the show was announced. Not because of the show itself, but because of the massive changes that they were doing throughout production, throughout the story. And I admit, I was one of them. And after hearing all the changes, I was almost not going to watch the show until I saw the trailers. And that the trailers blew me away. And I thought, okay, I'll give this a chance. I'm going to see if they can capture the essence of the book despite all these despite all the changes they're making. So we're going to look at the first 2 episodes and try not to compare them to the book as much. We'll try to save that for a later video. And very opening of the first show, we meet Daniel Malloy, an old investigative journalist who has been sent a series of tapes from an interview he conducted in the late 70s. And the person who he interviewed has reached out to him to reconduct the interview, to get the story straight, and to get the novel finally published. And the person he is interviewing is a 200-year-old vampire by the name of Louis Point du Lac. As the interview conducts, we are shown through flashback Louis as he was a human, as he was a pimp, and the struggles he had to face during his time. And the very first episode was very interesting. Not counting the whole interview parts of the episode, we got to see a lot of Louis. We got to see how he lived his life back in the day. We got to see his family life, which I'll talk about bringing the book in here for now. In the book, we never really got to look at Louis's family. We never got to see how he really interacted with them, and this is really nice, especially with interactions with his brother Paul. Paul is a very religious man. He is obviously mentally ill, and we have to see how Louis has to, for lack of better words, deal with him. How he has to handle his brother with the business that he is in, because Louis, while he is a good person, he is not doing good things. The way he is earning his money, how he's making a living for himself and his family, he is exploiting people. And we get to see how that kind of affects him and affects his family. Now, the real breakout part of the show, and for the very first episode, is, of course, the Brat Prince himself, the vampire, Lestat de Lincourt. And I had to tip my hat off to Mr. Sam Reed over here because he gives a fantastic performance. I admit, just by looking at his picture when he was first cast, I didn't think he was going to be a good Lestat, but watching the episode, seeing what he has seen so far, the man is perfect. He is Lestat through and through, probably even more than Tom Cruise was. We get to see his seduction of Louis, how their little courtship before he eventually makes him his fledgling, which all accommodates at the very end of the episode, when Lestat finally makes Louis into the vampire. And this scene, what a spectacle! I love every part of it. When Louis runs through the church, he's confessing everything to the priest. And I love the acting. I love Jacob Anderson's performance as Louis, especially right here. You see how he is confessing his sins. He's acknowledging all the bad he's doing. How he admits it to himself. He says, I give these women homes. I'm saying I'm giving them homes. I say I'm giving them money and food and a roof, but I'm just exploiting them. I'm using them. You feel the heartbreak in his soul. Like, he's so crying. And like it's moving you. And then Lestat ascends in the church. It's like a thunderstorm as he rips apart the confession booth. And half the church is on fire. Bunch of the pews are destroyed. And just such a spectacle. You get to see the power of Lestat is the true power of Lestat and how strong Anne Rice's vampires are. But out all the blood, and they made blood and guts. What gets the scene really going, though, once again, is the emotion, the intimacy between the characters. The only thing the show gets really, really good so far is the relationship between Lestat and Louis. And Sam Reed and Jacob Anderson have amazing chemistry. Because you can just tell in every shot that Lestat is so entranced with Louis, how much he's in love with Louis. Like, you feel it right off the bat. Episode 2 picks off right at the end of episode 1. At the end of episode 1, where we see Louis is starting his transformation into a vampire. And we get to see Louis as he experiences the world as a vampire. He is no longer a mortal man. We see in this episode how Louis is disconnecting himself from humans, or the lack of it, how he has a hard time separating himself from humanity, even though he is no longer human. He keeps trying to stay with his family, it's only costing him and them strain. He keeps working, even though he eventually can't be there forever. People are going to start noticing he's not aging. And this episode, while nice, is still a good episode. The one bad thing is it doesn't really convince you of Louis's pain. Like, there is one good scene where he is with his family and he is tempted. He's left alone with a child and he is very tempted to eat and kill this child, which is his nephew. And we see him run to Lestat, and he's crying his eyes out. But besides that, we don't really get his real pain or struggle of being a vampire, of having to kill. And that's basically what the kind of the ending is, that he can't really do this forever, that is having a toll on him, which we don't really see, which, to quickly bring it back to the 1994 movie, where I think Brad Pitt really did express that better. The pain of the idea of killing people every night to sustain himself was truly painful. You don't really see that with this version of Lewis, or at least I don't think it was portrayed correctly. Yeah, the most interesting thing about this episode, though, was the wraparound, was the part with the interview. Mostly we got some more stuff fleshing out the lore of this new alternate reality of the books, where we learn out that the vampires are liking the pandemic, that they want to use this to potentially take over the world, increase their numbers, which seems interesting. I don't know if they're going to do anything with that later, if that's going to be some big deviation from the books, specifically if they ever get to the Queen of the Damned novel. And in episode 2, we also continue with Lewis and Lestat's relationship, where they just full on develop into murder husbands. And it's nice, it's sweet. We also get the sense of their somewhat toxic relationship where Lestat doesn't really take anything seriously, which is very true to the book, where the first couple hours of Lewis's new life as a vampire are spent in pain and agony, and Lestat's just brushing it off like, oh, it's fine. What's wrong? Your body is dying? Oh, it happens to everyone. Just get used to it. I mean, that also comes back to later in the episode, where Lewis is crying his eyes out about almost killing a child, and Lestat's like, oh, it's nothing serious. Just forget about them. Hey, Louis, don't you want to spend time with me? Let's go on vacation. And once again, props to Sam Reed for his amazing performance. And you can really buy these two as this toxic couple that you can tell that they love each other, but it's not going to work out. And I do want to see how this turns out, because Lewis keeps referencing to how much he's enthralled by Lestat, but he never once says he loves Lestat. He never once says how much he cares about him during the flashbacks and during the present day. Because almost in every scene he's in, Lestat is doing nothing but proclaiming his love for Louis. But Louis never reciprocates. In actions, but never in words. I want to dedicate this one section just to quickly talk about one change I saw in the show that is irritating me just a little bit, and that is changes to the lore. Now, I'm not sure about everyone else, but I am a guy who loves lore. I love seeing how the mythology and science of how the science magic works in a world. And I always love Anne Rice's vampires and how she described them, how they worked. So that's one thing of the changes made that kind of irritated me, was like, how are they going to change the lore? And they changed the lore, how her vampires work in many different ways. But the one thing I do want to talk about is Lestat's powers. So, if you have not read the books, spoiler warning real quick, but in the books, or at least during the sections of interview, Lestat just has the basic common vampire powers, which are super strength, speed, senses, and his mind reading and telepathy, which he all has in the show. But Lestat also has the power of flight and telekinesis. Now, they did the flight in the original movie where he bites Louis, he flies up, which he shouldn't have that power yet, but that's a cool scene. They do it again in the show, which I'll forgive because it's good imagery. But you see several times Lestat has the power to, once again, when he's killing the priest at the end of episode 1, you see him closing the gate with his mind, which is pretty cool. But once again, he really shouldn't have that power yet. And there's a quick scene in episode 1 where it's hinted that he may even have his pyrokinesis abilities. Because once again, he should not have yet. He only gets those abilities after or during Queen of the Damned. And one ability they seem to add to Lestat's powers, which I'm not sure other vampires will have this power. It seems he has the ability to stop time. You see this in the first trailer, and we see in the show. During the scene where they're having a poker game, where Lestat it starts off with Lestat talking to Louis in his mind, but as the scene goes on, Louis realizes that everyone in the room is frozen. Now, at first, you're thinking Lestat is basically pulling a Professor X, where he's just pausing everyone in the moment. Or maybe he's even talking to Louis in his head. But we see that everything around them has stopped. Not just the people, but the chips in the air, the drink that is being poured is frozen in midair. So it seems Lestat is literally just stopping time. Which, I have no idea if that's what's truly happening, if that's a power he does have. Now, are they going to give all vampires this ability? Or is it just Lestat? Do other vampires have their own special powers? Which I'd hope they don't have. I don't really like that loose magic system, but I'm very curious where they're going to go with this. I hope it's explained just a little bit later on. And I want to know why they decided to make Lestat so much more powerful, give him all these different abilities that he didn't have yet. Like, he's almost Queen of the Damned level power Lestat. In conclusion, for the very first 2 episodes of the show, I am very surprised. I thought I was going to hate the show because of all the changes. And while some of the changes they have made, I still don't like. There are some that I think are expanding the lore. They are expanding certain things I wished were done in the book. I like they're making references and bringing in other parts of the other books. I cannot wait to see where the show goes on from here. I hope it only gets better. I'm still getting kind of worried with the changes they're making to a certain character, the vampire Claudia, whenever she makes her grand appearance. But we shall see. Interview with the Vampire, episode 1 and 2. So, what did you think about the show? Do you like it so far? Do you like the changes they made? Do you hate the changes that were made? Please let me know in the comments down below.